Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng. Here are the top stories. All eyes are on Doha today as Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim attends the emergency Arab-Islamic Summit to discuss the Israeli strike on the Qatari capital. Meanwhile, Israel intensifies bombing in Gaza City. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim will be delivering Malaysia's statement at the Arab-Islamic Extraordinary Summit today. He's expected to condemn the recent Israeli airstrike in Doha that targeted Hamas leaders and to highlight the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. Anwar is scheduled to speak at 11 p.m. local time. He will reaffirm Malaysia's strong solidarity with Qatar and its commitment to defending the rights of the Palestinian people. Anwar is attending the summit at the invitation of Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim Hamad Al Thani. The meeting will bring together leaders and representatives from member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Among those expected are Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani, and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Israeli forces have stepped up air and ground assaults on Gaza City, destroying around 30 residential buildings and displacing thousands, according to Palestinian officials. The military campaign comes as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives in Israel on Sunday.
Rubio said Washington's focus remained on securing the release of hostages and laying groundwork for Gaza's reconstruction. Rubio began his visit at Jerusalem's Western Wall before scheduled talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The U.S. State Department said the visit reaffirmed Washington's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a policy first formalized by Donald Trump in 2017. Over the past week, Israel reported 5 waves of strikes on Gaza City, hitting more than 500 targets, including tunnels, sniper sites, and weapon depots. Hamas claims Israel has destroyed 1,600 homes and 13,000 tents since 11 August.
Stay tuned for more after the break.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. U.S. and Chinese officials are back at the table in Madrid, Spain today for a second round of talks. On the agenda, tariffs, the broader economy, and that looming deadline for China to sell off its U.S. stake in TikTok.
Officials are also expected to lay the groundwork for a possible meeting between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping as soon as October, when both leaders are due at a summit in South Korea. The latest round of negotiations wrapped up its first day on Sunday after 6 hours of talks, with no sign of a breakthrough. The tariff truce between Washington and Beijing is still in place. It scaled back import taxes that had climbed to more than 100% on both sides. Delegations are led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China's Vice Premier He Lifeng. They last met in July when both sides agreed to extend the truce for 90 days. That deal runs out on November 10th.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says trade talks between Washington and Beijing in Europe have, in his words, gone very well. In a post on Truth Social, he suggested the discussions are close to a deal, hinting it could involve a company he says young Americans were keen to see preserved. While he did not name the company, it is widely believed he was referring to TikTok. Trump also said he plans to speak with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week, stressing that bilateral relationship remains a very strong one. United States Democrats call on the Trump administration to press China to cut back industrial overproduction as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent meets Chinese officials in Spain. In a letter to top economic officials, members of the House Committee on China say any trade deal must include binding rules to reduce overcapacity.
They warn that China produces far more than it consumes, flooding global markets with cheap exports, undercutting US industry and costing jobs. Beijing denies the charge but has launched measures to fight deflation and curb damaging price wars in sectors such as steel and solar panels. Talks began Sunday in Madrid, where Bessent and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer met Vice Premier He Feng's delegation.
United States President Donald Trump says he is ready to impose new sanctions on Russia, but only if Europe takes matching action. He also criticized European countries for continuing to buy Russian oil, saying their sanctions are still too weak.
Well, they're not doing the job. NATO has to get together. Europe has to get together and do it. Look, Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Trump also said he is confident a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will take place soon. However, he added that he would need to attend the talks and lead discussions, as he said the two leaders strongly dislike each other.
Russia has warned European countries it will retaliate against any attempts to seize its assets. The warning comes after reports that the European Union is considering using billions of dollars in frozen Russian funds to support Ukraine.
When President Vladimir Putin launched the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the United States and its allies blocked transactions with Russia's central bank and finance ministry, freezing around $300 to $350 billion in sovereign assets. According to Reuters, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is exploring ways to use those frozen funds to support Ukraine's defense. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev responded with a warning. He said Russia would go after the European Union, Brussels officials, and any countries involved in seizing assets for generations. He added that retaliation could take place on every front, in international courts, national courts, and even through measures outside the law. Moscow argues that seizing its assets would be outright theft and warned it could undermine trust in European and US bonds and currencies.
South Korea's government says it is looking into possible human rights violations during the raid and detention of its workers by U.S. authorities. Seoul has called on Washington to ensure its citizens' rights are protected during law enforcement operations.
A spokesperson for the presidential office said companies are also checking if safeguards fell short on either the Korean or American side. More than 300 South Korean workers were flown home last Friday after being held for a week in the US following a raid at a Hyundai battery plant in Georgia. South Korean media has since reported first-hand accounts of the detention, describing overcrowded and unsanitary conditions with some workers shackled in chains. The incident has put a strain on ties between Seoul and Washington. President Lee Jae-myung has warned it could discourage foreign investment in the US. This comes as South Korean firms prepare to pour billions into the country under a trade deal aimed at avoiding Trump's steep tariffs.
Separately, US President Donald Trump says foreign workers are welcome in the United States, insisting he does not want to frighten off investors. Trump said foreign experts can be brought in to help build complex products like semiconductors, computers, ships, and trains. He added the aim is for Americans to learn from them and eventually outperform them.
United States President Donald Trump says he is prepared to declare a national emergency in Washington, D.C., and place the city under federal control. The announcement comes after the mayor says the city's police will not cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement.
Trump insisted that the move restored order and improved public safety in the city. He went further, claiming Washington was now free of crime for the first time in decades. The president's remarks follow protests earlier this month, sparked by his August deployment of National Guard troops. Trump had already placed the city's police under direct federal control and authorized federal law enforcement, including ICE agents, to patrol Washington's streets, with no timeline has been given for their withdrawal. Critics say Trump's threat amounts to a federal overreach, pointing out that more than 2,000 troops are already stationed in the capital. In Washington, the National Guard operates differently than in the states. It reports directly to the president and can be federalized at his command.
Britain and the United States are set to sign a major nuclear power deal this week during U.S. President Donald Trump's state visit. The UK government says the agreement is aimed at boosting investment and speeding up construction of new plants.
Britain is making a big push into nuclear energy, committing £14 billion to the Sizewell C plant and advancing plans for Rolls-Royce to build the country's first small modular reactors. Trump arrives in Britain on Tuesday for a two-day visit, where he and Prime Minister Keir Starmer will confirm the partnership, which includes a plan to build up to 12 advanced modular reactors in northeast England. Another project worth £11 billion will develop data centres powered by small modular reactors in central England. Starmer said this commitment set Britain on course for a golden age of nuclear, promising lower household bills over time.
China says it will continue its investigation into U.S. chipmaker Nvidia after findings from a preliminary investigation suggested the company violated the country's anti-monopoly law. The State Administration for Market Regulation says it has evidence but did not specify the nature of the violations.
Under China's antitrust law, companies can be fined between 1 to 10% of their previous year's sales. Nvidia reported $17 billion in revenue from China last year, accounting for 13% of its total. China opened its inquiry late last year, focusing on Nvidia's 2020 takeover of Israeli network solution firm Mellanox. The probe had been widely seen as a retaliatory shot against Washington's curb on the Chinese chip sector. Beijing has also opened two other investigations, one targeting US analog chips and another into American policies that it says unfairly hurt China's semiconductor industry.
One of Thailand's new Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul's first task since taking office is tackling the strength of the baht. The currency has hit multi-year highs, raising concerns for businesses and exporters. Anutin, who was elected last week, says the issue needs urgent attention and will be discussed later with the Federation of Thai Industries.
The baht traded at 31.74 per US dollar this morning after hitting a more than 4-year high last week. The Industry Federation said a rate of 34 to 35 baht per dollar would be more suitable. Anutin will also seek royal approval for his new cabinet this week. His incoming team includes Finance Minister Ekniti Niti Tan Prapas, who will take the lead on addressing the baht's strength. The currency has risen nearly 8% this year, making it Asia's second-best performer after Taiwan's dollar. Anutin, who won a parliamentary vote with an overwhelming majority, has just 4 months in power before calling an election under an agreement with the largest party in parliament.
That's AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head on to international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching and good night.